I caught my brother and my fiancée planning to steal my $10,000 wedding fund on my own security camera. The look on their faces when I played that footage for our entire family? Priceless. It was exactly 11:47 p.m. when my world collapsed. I sat alone in my office, staring at my laptop screen as my brother Connor's hands ran through my fiancée Avery's hair on my couch in my apartment while I was supposedly working late. My coffee slipped from my fingers, black liquid seeping into my keyboard, but I couldn't look away. "He won't even notice the money's gone until it's too late," Avery laughed, discussing how they'd steal my wedding savings to start their new life together. My chest tightened until breathing became painful. My vision tunneled. In that moment, I wasn't just witnessing infidelity. I was watching two people I loved plotting to destroy me. Have you ever felt your reality crack beneath your feet? That sickening free fall when you discover the people closest to you have been living a double life. I was the software engineer who could predict coding failures but couldn't see the betrayal happening under my own roof. The signs were there all along, if only I'd been willing to see them. This isn't just another cheating story. This is how I uncovered their deception, confronted them in front of everyone they respected, and rebuilt myself from the ashes they left behind. By the time I finished with them, neither would ever forget what they'd done, and neither will you after hearing what happened next. 2 years before everything imploded, my life embodied the Seattle tech success story. At 28, I was leading a development team at a promising fintech startup, had just purchased a waterfront condo overlooking Elliott Bay, and had recently proposed to Avery Parker, the brilliant UX designer who'd captivated me with her razor-sharp mind and infectious laugh when we met at a hackathon. The proposal took weeks to choreograph, private access to the Space Needle observation deck secured through a college friend, 144 roses representing our weeks together, and a custom 2-carat emerald-cut diamond that caught the light exactly like her eyes. When she said yes, jumping into my arms as the Seattle skyline sparkled behind us, I genuinely believed I'd reached life's summit. That photo became my phone background, my daily reminder that I, Mason Reed, had somehow won at life. "I can't believe this is real," she'd whispered that night. I couldn't either, but for entirely different reasons now. While my life ascended, my older brother Connor's was crumbling. His 5-year relationship with Olivia had imploded spectacularly when she left him for her CrossFit instructor. His sales career hung by a thread after missing quota 3 quarters running. The contrast between us couldn't have been starker. Me climbing, him free-falling. "It's just temporary," he assured me, eyes hollow with defeat when I offered him my guest room. "Just until I get back on my feet." Our childhood created the perfect conditions for what would follow. Growing up in Portland, we shared the same dark hair and athletic build, but Connor had always been the charismatic one, the baseball star, while I excelled academically. Mason's the brains, Connor's the heart, our mom would repeat at family gatherings, never realizing how that simple categorization bred a lifetime of silent competition. When I asked Connor to be my best man, something flickered behind his eyes, something I misread as emotion rather than the opportunity it actually was. "Of course, little bro," he said, embracing me tighter than usual. "I'd be honored." Wedding planning accelerated. Avery and I chose Thornwood Castle for the venue, secured vendors, and I diligently saved $10,000 for a perfect day. Connor inserted himself into every aspect, joining vendor meetings, attending tastings, even befriending Avery's parents over dinner. "You guys are the perfect couple," he'd say, raising his glass with that trademark Connor charm. I hope I find something like this someday. If I'd been truly paying attention, I might have noticed how his eyes lingered on Avery when he said it, or how their conversation continued seamlessly even when I left the room. But I was too busy designing our future to notice they were already rewriting it behind my back. The perfect facade was about to develop its first fatal crack. The first unmistakable warning came exactly 79 days before our scheduled wedding date. A Tuesday I now mark as the day I should have seen everything clearly. I'd solved a persistent database issue that had kept me working late for weeks and decided to surprise Avery by coming home early. From the hallway of our apartment, I heard them before I saw them. Avery's musical laugh and Connor's deeper chuckle flowing from the kitchen. I paused, hand frozen on the doorknob, a primal instinct suddenly holding me back. Through the crack in the door, I glimpsed them, standing closer than necessary. Avery perched on the counter, Connor leaning toward her, his hand just inches from her thigh. When I pushed the door open, they sprung apart like teenagers caught by parents. "Mason, you're home early." Avery's voice pitched higher than normal, a flush spreading across her cheeks as she explained they were discussing bachelor party plans. That night, a text illuminated her phone on our nightstand. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." From Connor. When I questioned it, she didn't hesitate. "He's helping me pick your wedding gift." A plausible explanation. But like the first hairline fracture in a dam, something had broken in my trust. A small fissure that would soon become a flood. More inconsistencies followed, each seemingly minor but forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. Our Wednesday lunch dates, sacred time we'd maintained even during product launches, were suddenly rescheduled or canceled altogether. "Client emergency," she'd text, often minutes before we were supposed to meet. Her phone became an extension of her hand, always face down when set on a table. Password changed for security reasons. Meanwhile, Connor, who had been cycling through the same 3 sweatpants for weeks, underwent a transformation too convenient to be coincidental. New clothes, new haircut, pre-dawn gym sessions that the brother I knew would never voluntarily attend. "Getting back in the game," he explained, though I increasingly wondered what game he was really playing, especially when he returned with shopping bags from stores I knew exceeded his budget. They developed inside jokes I wasn't part of, references to conversations I hadn't witnessed. When I'd enter a room, their laughter would abruptly cease, replaced by exaggerated interest in my day. I started noticing that on our shared location app, Avery's dot would show her at Pacific Place Mall, while Connor would coincidentally be running errands in the exact same area. The programmer in me couldn't ignore these data points, each one strengthening a hypothesis I didn't want to confirm. I nearly caught them 3 weeks before the wedding. Avery claimed she was working late on a client presentation, so I decided to surprise her at her office with dinner. Her coworker's confusion was immediate. "Avery left hours ago, said she had a migraine." My stomach nodded as I drove home, mentally rehearsing confrontation questions. But when I'd arrived, Avery was indeed in bed, looking genuinely ill, with Connor nowhere to be found. The perfect alibi, or was my paranoia taking over? The uncertainty was its own kind of torture. The Hickey incident should have been the final confirmation. Avery returned home one Wednesday evening with a small purple mark on her neck, poorly concealed with makeup. When I pointed it out, her hand flew to her neck, eyes widening momentarily before she recovered. "It's an allergic reaction to a new necklace," she laughed nervously, voice slightly higher than normal. I almost believed her. Almost. But the receipt I found the next day removed all doubt. Tucked inside her jacket pocket was evidence of a $290 dinner at Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant, on a night Avery claimed to be working late. Connor couldn't afford Canlis on his commission checks. The variables in this equation suddenly aligned into an undeniable conclusion. That night, staring at the ceiling as Avery slept beside me, I made the decision that would expose everything and change all our lives forever. If they wanted to play games, I'd show them what it meant to lose. The security camera was small enough to go unnoticed, wedged between programming manuals on my office bookshelf and angled toward our living room. I told myself it was for home security, for peace of mind, the rationalization of a man who already knew the truth but needed irrefutable proof. 3 agonizing days passed. I went through the motions, coding at work, making dinner at home, discussing wedding details, all while carrying this secret surveillance. Each smile exchanged between Avery and Connor took on new meaning. Each text message sent, each synchronized absence. I was collecting data points for a conclusion I already dreaded. On the third night, I stayed at the office past midnight, debugging code that wouldn't cooperate, a welcome distraction from the thoughts consuming me. Taking a break, I opened the security app on my laptop, more out of restlessness than expectation. What happened next is seared into my memory with such perfect clarity that I can recall every excruciating detail. Connor's blue Subaru pulled up outside our building at precisely 11:47 p.m. Avery, who had texted me she was working late on client presentations, rushed out to meet him, barefoot, despite the Seattle drizzle. They didn't come inside immediately. They sat in his car for 22 minutes, talking intensely before their conversation dissolved into kisses that turned my stomach inside out. My hands trembled so violently I knocked over my coffee mug, black liquid seeping into my keyboard. A small detached part of my brain worried about the equipment damage, while the rest of me watched in stunned horror as my world imploded in real time in high-definition clarity. When they finally entered the apartment, their behavior wasn't rushed or awkward. It was comfortable, practiced. Avery kicked off her heels and curled up next to Connor on my couch, her head on his shoulder with the easy familiarity that only comes from repetition. This clearly wasn't their first night together. "When are you going to tell him?" Connor asked, fingers playing with her hair, the exact same way I had done countless times. "After the venue deposit deadline passes," Avery replied, her voice businesslike, strict of emotion. "We can't afford to lose that money." Then came the statement that transformed my heartbreak into white-hot rage. Connor outlined their plan to use my wedding fund, $10,000. I'd saved over 18 months of 80-hour work weeks to start over in Portland. Avery laughed and said, "He won't even notice it's gone until it's too late. He trusts me with all the wedding finances." But the most cutting revelation wasn't about the money. It was Connor's next words. He always thinks he's the smartest person in the room, always the golden boy, mom and dad's perfect son. For once he won't see it coming. "You deserve this," Avery said, kissing him again. "You're the better brother. You always were." My entire body went cold, then hot, then numb. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated, vengeful. They resented me while accepting my hospitality, my support, my love. Everything I believed about my relationship with my brother, with my fiancé, with my family, all of it was built on quicksand. For a moment, I considered rushing home, confronting them, unleashing the tsunami of rage building inside me. But some final thread of self-preservation held me back. They believed I was clueless. That was my only advantage in a game I never asked to play. I closed my laptop, drove to a hotel, and spent the night staring at the ceiling, tears silently soaking my pillow as I formulated a plan that would ensure they never forgot what they'd done. By morning, grief had hardened into resolve. They thought I was the fool in this story. I was about to show them just how wrong they were. I didn't want a private confrontation where they could deny everything or twist the narrative later. I wanted witnesses, accountability. I wanted the masks of their deception ripped away so violently they'd never recover their former faces. First, I protected what was mine. The morning after my discovery, hands still trembling with a combination of adrenaline and sleep deprivation, I transferred our wedding fund from our joint account to my personal account. Avery had access to it for wedding expenses, but thankfully hadn't emptied it yet, waiting for that venue deadline to pass, just as she'd said on camera. I changed all passwords, froze my credit, and contacted our vendors to ensure they wouldn't accept changes without my direct approval. The venue coordinator's sympathetic tone, when I explained the situation briefly, nearly broke through my numbness. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Reed," she said quietly. "We've seen this before. Would you like us to return your deposit?" "Keep it," I replied. "I'll need the space for a different kind of gathering." Then I orchestrated what would become the most memorable dinner party of our lives. I invited my parents, Avery's parents, and our 6 closest friends for what I called a pre-wedding celebration dinner at my place that weekend. Everyone accepted enthusiastically, completely unaware they were about to become witnesses in this unfolding tragedy. The 3 days between discovery and confrontation were the most surreal of my life. I maintained the charade flawlessly, smiling at Avery over breakfast, chatting with Connor about bachelor party plans, selecting wines for the dinner, all while carrying this devastating knowledge, this digital evidence of their betrayal. Each "I love you" from Avery felt like swallowing broken glass. Each time Connor called me bro made bile rise in my throat. "You seem distracted," Avery noted on the second night, placing her hand on mine. "Wedding stress getting to you?" The irony was so thick I could barely breathe through it. "Just want everything to be perfect," I replied, meeting her eyes directly. "Especially the dinner this weekend. It's important that everyone sees exactly what's happening." She smiled, misunderstanding completely. "That's sweet. I can't wait." The evening of the dinner, I prepared Avery's favorite meal, salmon with dill sauce she'd once claimed was better than any restaurant. I set the table with our wedding registry china, connected my laptop to the TV for what I promised would be a special slideshow of our relationship journey. In a way, it would be exactly that, just not the version anyone expected. When Avery came home to find me cooking, she seemed genuinely touched. "This is so thoughtful," she said, kissing my cheek while Connor watched from across the room. I wondered if she could feel my heart hammering through my skin, if she could sense that this was the last time I would ever allow her to touch me. As guests arrived, the atmosphere was festive. Champagne flowed. Conversation bubbled. Avery's parents, both university professors with her same sharp intelligence, brought an expensive bottle of champagne for the soon-to-be newlyweds. My mom brought her famous apple pie that Connor and I had fought over since childhood. Friends arrived bearing gifts and well wishes for a future that was about to implode spectacularly. Throughout dinner, I noticed Avery and Connor's subtle communications that now seemed glaringly obvious, their feet touching under the table, secret glances when they thought no one was looking, synchronized bathroom breaks. Once, I caught Avery's father watching them with a slight frown, as if sensing something amiss, but unable to identify it. After dinner, the moment I'd been rehearsing mentally arrived. I stood to make a toast, my heart hammering against my ribs so violently I wondered if others could see my shirt moving. The room quieted as I raised my glass, 16 pairs of eyes looking at me with affection and expectation. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate love and loyalty." I paused, looking directly at Avery, whose smile faltered slightly at my tone. "Before we have dessert, I'd like to share something special I've been working on." I pressed play. The room fell into a silence so complete you could hear people's breath catch. The footage was undeniable. Connor's car, Avery rushing out, their passionate embrace, their entrance into our apartment. But worse was the audio. Crystal clear, thanks to my apartment's excellent acoustics. Their discussion of stealing my money, Connor's resentment, Avery's betrayal, their systematic dismantling of my trust played out in high definition before everyone they respected. The reactions were visceral and immediate. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, a small sound of distress escaping her. Avery's father stood so abruptly his chair crashed to the floor. Our friends froze, some unable to look at the screen, others unable to look away. But I kept my gaze fixed on Avery and Connor, her face drained of color, eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal, his body tensed as if preparing to flee. "Stop the video," Avery whispered, voice cracking. "Why?" I asked calmly, a strange serenity flowing through me now that the moment had arrived. "Everyone should hear how you plan to steal $10,000 from me while sleeping with my brother behind my back. Everyone should know exactly who you both really are." What followed was exactly what you'd expect from people whose masks had been torn away. First, denial, then blame shifting. Avery claimed I was emotionally unavailable, too focused on work. Connor insisted it just happened, and they never meant to hurt me. When those excuses crashed against the wall of video, "How long?" Avery's mother asked, tears streaming down her face. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 2 months," I answered when neither would. "Maybe longer." My father, a quiet man, who rarely showed strong emotion, surprised everyone by addressing Connor directly. "I have never been so disappointed in my entire life. To betray your own brother." He couldn't finish the sentence, his voice breaking with a combination of anger and grief. I delivered my final verdict with eerie calm. "The wedding is obviously off, and that $10,000 you plan to steal? Already in my personal account. You both need to leave. Now." Avery tried to take her engagement ring, but I reminded her that legally it was a conditional gift. She placed it on the table, tears streaming down her face, not from remorse, but from exposure. The difference was palpable. "Mason, please." She attempted one last time, reaching for my arm. "We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, stepping away from her touch as if it were contaminated. "You said everything I needed to hear. On video, in your own words." They left together, two disgraced figures slinking away under the weight of collective judgment. The silence following their departure was deafening. 16 people processing what they'd just witnessed. Their understanding of two people they thought they knew completely upended. That night created fractures that would never fully heal. Our mother couldn't look at Connor, physically turning away when he tried to speak to her. Dad attempted mediation but couldn't hide his disappointment. Avery's parents were shattered, her mother hugging me before leaving, whispering how sorry she was for raising such a selfish daughter. Most friends rallied around me, expressing shock and support. A few tried to stay neutral, saying these things happen. Those aren't my friends anymore. Betrayal has a way of clarifying who truly matters in your life. After everyone left, I stood alone in the apartment we'd shared, surrounded by the debris of the dinner and the larger wreckage of my life plans. The confrontation had provided momentary satisfaction, but as adrenaline faded, the reality of what I'd lost began to settle around me like a heavy fog. Justice had been served, but at what cost? I wasn't just losing a fiancé. I was losing a brother, family unity, and a future I had meticulously planned. The victory felt hollow as I faced the empty rooms and the even emptier future ahead. The aftermath nearly destroyed me. The public confrontation had provided closure, but opened a wound so deep I couldn't see its bottom. I moved out of our shared apartment within days. Every corner held memories now poisoned by betrayal. I found a sterile high-rise downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of Elliott Bay that I couldn't appreciate. For weeks, I merely existed. Sleep evaded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Food lost its taste. My body functioned while my mind replayed their betrayal on endless loop. My technical brain later learned there's a clinical term for this: betrayal trauma, where nervous system responds to severe betrayal similarly to physical danger. Your brain literally struggles to reconcile how those you trusted most could hurt you deepest, creating a fracture in your basic understanding of reality. My rock bottom came exactly 17 days after the confrontation dinner. I hadn't left my apartment in 3 days, hadn't showered in 2, was surviving on delivery pizza and whiskey. My phone showed 27 missed calls. From work, friends, even my therapist, whom I'd started seeing then ghosted. I stood on my balcony at 3 a.m., staring at the dark water below. Not actively suicidal, but profoundly disconnected from any desire to continue existing. The rain soaked through my t-shirt as I wondered how everything could change so completely in less than a month. A turning point came unexpectedly. Jess, a coworker who'd become a friend, used the emergency contact information from HR to access my building. She found me in that state, unshaven, unwashed, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and whiskey bottles, staring out at the rain. "This isn't just heartbreak," she said, opening curtains I'd kept closed for days, letting gray Seattle light filter into the apartment. "This is trauma, and you need help." She was right. When someone dies, people bring casseroles and offer support. When your relationship dies from betrayal, people don't know what to do with your grief. Jess drove me to my abandoned therapy appointments, waiting in the lobby to ensure I didn't leave early. My therapist, Dr. Chen, didn't waste time with platitudes. Your brain is trying to process a psychological injury, she explained during our first real session. Just like physical therapy after breaking a bone, recovery requires consistent work, even when it hurts. Those weekly sessions became my lifeline. We worked through my rage, my humiliation, my fear of trusting again. Dr. Chen helped me understand that what happened wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of their character. The betrayal says nothing about your value, she insisted during a particularly difficult session, but everything about their integrity. You didn't fail a test, Mason. They did. Recovery wasn't a straight line, but a jagged, unpredictable path. Some days I felt stronger, almost grateful to have discovered their betrayal before the wedding. Other days, a song or scent would trigger memories, and I'd spiral into darkness again. The security footage haunted my dreams. I had to delete it from all devices on Dr. Chen's advice. It's serving as a trauma trigger, she explained. You've seen it. Everyone who matters has seen it. Now let it go. Slowly, I built new routines to reclaim my life. Every morning, I forced myself to run along the waterfront, regardless of Seattle's notorious weather. Initially, I could barely manage a mile without stopping, my body weakened by weeks of neglect. But gradually, those runs extended, 3 miles, 5. Eventually training for a half marathon, the physical exertion pushed out the ruminating thoughts is only temporarily. I pursued interests Avery had dismissed, piano lessons, cooking classes, even improv comedy to push my introverted boundaries. Each new skill became a brick in rebuilding my identity beyond the guy who got betrayed. I joined a rock climbing gym and discovered I had an aptitude for problem solving on the wall, similar to debugging code, but physically demanding in a way that quieted my mind. The $10,000 wedding fund sat untouched in my account for months, a digital reminder of what almost happened. After much consideration and several therapy sessions discussing its symbolic weight, I made a decision that Dr. Chen called powerfully reclamatory. I booked a solo trip to Japan, something Avery had vetoed as too far and too expensive whenever I suggested it. Standing at the summit of Mount Fuji at sunrise 4 months later, watching light spread across the landscape, I experienced my first moment of genuine peace. Surrounded by strangers who knew nothing of my story, I realized I wasn't just surviving this betrayal, I was finding my way back to myself through it. The person I was before Avery and Connor's betrayal was gone forever, but perhaps the person emerging from this crucible could be stronger, more self-aware, more authentic. Work provided another anchor. I channeled my pain into creating a security application that helped people protect their digital privacy, turning my traumatic experience into something potentially helpful for others. My renewed focus and innovation earned me a promotion to lead a major project, an opportunity that might never have materialized had I been distracted with wedding planning and honeymoon arrangements. 6 months after the confrontation, the universe offered an unexpected form of closure. I encountered Avery at a coffee shop downtown. She looked diminished somehow. Her designer clothes were placed by something nondescript. The confident spark in her eyes dimmed. She approached hesitantly, asking if we could talk. I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. We broke up, she said, stirring her coffee nervously. Connor and I. It lasted 3 months. She didn't elaborate, but I could guess. Relationships built on betrayal rarely survive exposure to reality. Then she asked the question that showed how little she understood the damage done. Is there any chance for us, Mason, now that it's over with Connor? I studied her face, once so beloved, now belonging to a stranger. The question was so absurd, so disconnected from reality, that I almost laughed. Not in this lifetime, I replied calmly. But I forgive you, not for you, for me. I'm finally sleeping through the night again, and I'd like to keep it that way. The surprise on her face was worth every painful moment of recovery. She had expected anger, perhaps even hope, but not this calm detachment. Walking away from that conversation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Freedom. The weight I'd been carrying had finally begun to lift. not because of anything she said or did, but because I was no longer defined by what they had done to me. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone they would never know. Trust isn't binary. It's not something you either have or don't. It exists in layers, earned through consistent actions, not grand gestures or shared history. This was my most valuable lesson, one I apply to every relationship now. People often ask if the public confrontation dinner was too harsh, too theatrical. Maybe it was, but sometimes public accountability is the only justice available for emotional devastation. I don't regret giving them exactly what they deserved, consequences. In a world where betrayal often goes unpunished, there was something fundamentally satisfying about watching them face the collective judgment of everyone whose opinion they valued. The experience transformed how I approach relationships. I'm more cautious now, yes, but not closed off. I've learned that healthy vigilance differs from paranoia, that seeming perfection in relationships often hides the deepest problems, that sometimes losing people who don't respect you is actually gaining self-respect. Connor and I haven't spoken since that night. Our parents have tried arranging reconciliation, especially around holidays, but some bridges remain permanently burned. Not all family deserves proximity to your life, my father told me recently. Surprising words from a man who always prioritized family bonds above all else. Sometimes the healthiest thing is distance. Forgiveness is complicated. I've forgiven them enough to move forward with my life, but not enough to welcome them back into it. I've forgiven enough to sleep at night, but not enough to pretend their actions were mere mistakes. True forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Today, 1 year after that security camera footage shattered my world, my life looks different but surprisingly fulfilling. I lead a team developing privacy-focused applications that recently secured major venture funding. I completed that half marathon in under 2 hours. I play piano adequately enough to enjoy it. I've even started dating again, taking it slowly with someone who understands my history and respects my cautious pace. The engagement ring that once represented my future, I sold it and donated half the money to a trauma recovery center. The other half funded a 2-week hiking trip through New Zealand's South Island. Both decisions feel like victories, transforming symbols of pain into something healing for myself and others. The most profound change isn't external but internal. I no longer define my worth through others' perceptions or actions. I've stopped trying to be the perfect son or achieve external markers of success to validate my existence. There's a freedom in rebuilding your life exactly as you wanted, without compromising for someone else's vision or expectations. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you completely trusted? How did you move forward? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. There's healing in knowing you're not alone in navigating these waters. For those currently drowning in betrayal trauma, check the description for resources that helped me through my darkest days. Remember that rock bottom can become the foundation on which you rebuild a more authentic life. Trust can be restored with the right people.